Much love to you and yours. This meditation and music in the background. Good day, beloved. It's from Meditative Mind, and it's, I don't own the rights to it. It is Cosmic Cavern. Release subconscious bad energy. Okay, it's frequency 852 hertz. Excuse me. I was already listening to that. I don't want to stop. Today, I want to talk about something that I really been feeling. I started reading parts of this book, and I just wanted to share that part of my journey as somebody else was sharing their part of the journey. Part of what I'm going to share is this book. Mama Zobi shared her story and writing about the ancient deities that they morphed and changed. This book has been so helpful in my research. They really, when you start to look at the matrix and the stuff that they hid from us and the story, and you look deeper, and when I was looking at ancient Earth history, the extraterrestrial history, and I was looking at the bloodlines like the Dagon, the Sibyls, the the Draconian bloodline. I ran into this, which made all the connections. A lot of the connections, some of the stuff that I was sharing with you, I got from out of this book. Much love, family. So it's been a long journey, and we're in a time of awakening, and there's so many different little bits and pieces that we add to this therapeutic procession, right? During this astrological alignment, when we're awakening, right? It's a time of awakening. I found that some of the things that have been warped and bent are the offerings to the ancestors. And in my research, I was listening to a book that I was reading called The Emerald Tablets, the Book of Thor. And toward the end, one of the deities was saying to Thor that people will wake up to the fact that because of the lack of offerings, it would set things off balance. And I didn't really understand that too much at the time from the perspective that I've been raised in. I didn't understand what that meant, because giving offerings and sacrifices in my mind is evil, right? It's bad. And I was looking at how other cultures usurp from our cultures. And basically what it does is make us the sacrifice to be able to produce what it is that they need and desire. By usurping our ancient culture and our past, which some of us diligently went back and did the research and retrieved. There's so many scholars, African diaspora scholars, to bring us so much information. The destruction of a black civilization, the nature, the relationship between Jews and Hebrews. So offerings, what are we offering in it? It tied in all my research with the talents, you know, and how they take the talents and they bend them, kind of end up turning it in on us. Well, that little piece of information that I ran into, it stayed in my mind. I take stuff and I put it on the shelf. So when I was listening to that part in the book, I was like, I know that has a deeper meaning than what I can internalize at the time. So I'm just going to take that, put it on the shelf. Then I looked at passion. To endure, suffer. Originally suffering, or as a martyr, right? Who's been martyred. Excuse me, playing with words with the grammar and glamour, where excuse me is basically to excuse me, meaning that you're not included. And that's been a predominant theme in America, with the way we're treated by Eurocentric culture predominantly, and the way that trends throughout the world, which I do see unfraying now because of the lack of credibility and the fact that we're waking up. Each one teach one is like the 1,000 monkeys, like a percussion, you know, like a resounding sound when it comes to the consciousness grid. The passion is to be able to get the good news to those who suffer, like yourself, because you're like the wounded healer. So that martyr doesn't stay martyred. They rise up, right? Like many of our scholars who retrieved information that, like Sebi, like Dr. Sebi. Many of our scholars that retrieved information that wasn't the predominant theme at the time. So they were rejected and they pushed forward anyway, right? And to their little space. And so it was for those who could hear. So they became the wounded healer. They didn't stay martyred, because that's a state of mind that we're recognizing coming up out of this place. And so the story in this book that I want to share today, it's in the blood, touched me very deeply. Passion, a state of being affected by an external agent or influence. The condition of being affected upon, of acted upon, as opposed to action. So passion, a state of being, a condition of being acted upon as opposed to action. Possession. For the power of receiving or being affected by outside influences. So a lot of this stuff was used against us. Hey, cuz, much love to you. I'm talking about how things have been turned on us, and how now that we're waking up, we get an opportunity to empathize with one another. It's kind of like a different layer of spirituality. And we were disconnected, and now we can be connected. And it happens more emotionally than it does just by the words, because the words get in the way. So there is this emotional connection that happens. Passion, possession, offerings, which is what other scholars have given us that we can grow off of. And so today, I'm going to be reading from this book. This touched me so much. I wanted to give that before, even though I was going to give it after, just so I don't forget, as a prelude to this kiss, because this is like beautiful. Okay. Walking with a spiritual master. In memory of Master Mami Wata Voodoo Master Priest, she's the priestess. Prelude. Excuse my voice. From the start, my godfather, dear friend and guide of nearly 10 years in the flesh, Master Mami Wata Voodoo Priest, Akuti, Duraba, and the 100-year-old Master, Bukun, whom we all knew as the Old Man, advised me that in 7 years, as soon as the roads were opened by the Afa, Master of Destiny, that I'd have to undergo some very important ceremonies after more than 13 years of suffering and having had undergone a series of ceremonies performed by them to cool and stabilize my spirits. Afa then made me promise that in exactly 7 years and no later, that I would return to Africa to commence what would be many more extensive ceremonies, with the final parts to be completed in America, whereas my shrines would be installed. Afa then announced that because of my long suffering and honorable way in which my ancestors had previously served the spirits, that we had paid enough, and Afa ordered that I not be charged by priests for the ceremonies that were performed by me during my stay in Togo. History. We've been hearing history, but his story is our story, but we've only been hearing one part of this conundrum. So I'm reading someone else who went through the rabbit hole, came out the other side, like many other scholars and many of us who are awakening and going on search into our studies and listening to those deeper voices from within inside of us, trusting the ancestral voices and the voices of our Creator, the voice of our Creator, and listening to a different guide, marching to a different tune in a direction that we feel is more productive for us. So many of the village priests were still baffled and amazed that I had traveled all the way from America, carrying the old Mami and voodoo gods in my blood, who were now demanding a shrine. They could not believe that the spirits which traditionally caused the profound intensity of suffering that I had been accustomed for so long existed outside of Africa. Each priest repeating the same incredulous refrain that only Africans suffer with spirits like that. For a brief moment, there was a pensive, almost mournful period of silence and uneasy introspection as it brought home to us all just how devastating slavery was on Africa and its children transported across the world. Many more importantly, that revealed just how badly neglected that deities had connected to the blood of the diaspora, and perhaps more are connected to the blood of diaspora, perhaps more magnificently. And destructively had been, as they now insisted that they be appeased under the same ancient rites still in possession of the certain lineage priests of West Africa. What? Energy never dies, it only transforms. Okay, so the same energy that they morphed into these other gods and deities, and homage was being paid to them because we were paying homage to their likeness and their interpretation of our ancestral lineage, and denying our own ancestral lineage via MK, mind control, brainwashing through the systems, telling us that we had no right to even look, that it was evil to even look. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., they're using symbolism and ancient, occult, dark magic. I'm like, the words get in the way. But those who study this stuff, you know what I'm talking about, okay? The layout of Washington, D.C. Check me out on Regina's Rabbit Hole, Siren Buddha Medicine on YouTube, where I have many videos explaining a lot of this stuff from different directions. We're living in a morph where the sciences and energies that we used to govern in one way, not that it wasn't misused, it used to be always Africa, right? Always Asia, always Moorish, Islamic, Asiatic, okay? And then the continents shifted, right? And the Fire Nation came. No, kinda. The continent shifted and things changed. Excuse me. We can hear a lot of stories of evolution and how the continental plates shifted, whatever interpretation they want to give it. We know that there was a changing in the weather, a changing in the food supply, and a changing in the people. There was an evolution in technology and in language, right? Or was there according to what we used to have in the sciences, there was a de-evolution. There wasn't an evolution, okay? When it comes to the Renaissance, right? When it comes to the ancient Moorish past, we know that we used to have technologies and stuff. We used to have electricity, but it ran on not wires and stuff like they have now. Everything they copy that our Creator gave us functions outside of the basic organic system. Everything but the body. The body is still wired, but we're spiritually disconnected from our ancient systems. Okay? These systems are organic and they're duplicated materialistically by things like computers and buildings where they harness energy and they utilize stuff that we used to govern after our disenfranchisement. So we've had a decline in technology, not a progression. We're progressing back now, but only by way of them usurping. Which is one of the reasons why I love this book, because she had the same beef. And so did all of our African scholars who studied this stuff. But from different angles for different reasons, they had a problem with the mentality behind a lot of the literature that was depicting us, okay? And voodoo, or the more of our spiritual systems or deities, like I love this book. Give me a second. I want to see the part where she talks about how things were usurped. If I move too fast, I will really lose my place, so bear with me. Okay. Here we go. She says in her foreword, presently there is not a single individual who boasts initiation into the African religion where their road does not ultimately trace back to the jet black African who is now unappreciated and forgotten by them. It is ignorant and arrogant to deny this, just as it is ignorant and arrogant to practice Judaism if one is a hater of Jews, or to practice Hinduism if one despises and rejects the humanity of Hindu. Conversely, it is equally ignorant and arrogant to claim an African god as one's own and reject the humanity, okay, and predominance of the African people and their own ancient spiritual paths, which their ancestors created and suffered for them. What? Yes. Much love, family. Hi, Ingram. I agree with her. What? And then she says, unfortunately, too, they are usually the authors of those faceless books flaunting African names and currently flood the market of voodoo and African spirituality, often written to anchor, validate, and to justify themselves to the experience of African people. They too are usually void of any coherent, integrative African cosmetology, in which the African ancestors remain front and center. Most of these authors are usually incapable of understanding, let alone respecting the African spiritual intellect, and clearly possess no stake in the African people, nor in the enrichment of their communities. Though we can expect much more of this, it is important to understand that this trend is not new. It is part of a historical conundrum whose roots extend way back into the ancient history, when African religions, through heavy pillaged and demonetized today, were the main civilizing divine force in the entire ancient world. Fortunately, due to the profound wisdom of the African ancestors, they did not reveal their true mysteries to the outsiders. Then, and for no amount of money, the overwhelming majority will never know their true mysteries today. At least not as the African, it being their birthright, has the inherent potential to know, which is why the ancestors must be honored by them, as they are forced to honor the ancestors of others. And this is part of our knowing when we wake up, that we will receive according to your genetic code, according to your intention, because there's a lot of people all over the world that are messed up. Okay? This is going by something much deeper that can't be fooled. So I wanted to read that part. So what's up? What do you think so far? Do you like Mami Zoba? Okay. Okay, back to the story. The still confounded priests watched and listened in sympathetic silence, nodding their heads in consequential agreement as Afa concluded the session, speaking through the old man, prophesying that I would be doing something big in America, and that Akuti and I were linked in a spiritual way, that it was at that time I was genuinely afraid to ask, as long as Akuti knew I was fine. Deeply grateful for the help and clarity that I had been given by the old man, I volunteered a respectful donation. The old man then proceeded to perform a special ceremony at my feet, officially welcoming me, my ancestors, and our spirits back to Africa. It was also meant to open the road for my future work in America. The now humbled priestess seemed almost profound of my courage, as they imagined my being their biological child who was performing a sacred act of epic and historical proportion and surviving years of untold torment, finally to arrive at the foot of such a powerful and well respected Togobai, Master Bukunu, and Akanti, whom it was clear that all of the priests admired and honored. This has been severed. We had our people, our spiritual people, who knew how to actually clear away negative energy. Certain people have been controlling the narrative. I'm switching you back to my notes on why the story was so deeply meaningful to me where I wanted to share it with you and actually read it. The origins of psychology. The DMV, Department of Mental Health, right? Slaves, when they ran away, were considered mentally ill, and they used to put those little collars on them and stuff. You're crazy, why are you leaving? Because the predominant narrative was that these brown bodies and these people who worshipped other gods, because that area served the morphed interpretation of our deities in order to mind control the people, so we'll be okay. So if you control the narrative, you control the matrix. Okay? We had the Inquisition, we had the Holy Wars, and we had the Age of Enlightenment. Okay? Where they took and tried to white out anything, and they started to further damage and sever the connections that we had to our past, to our power, to our spirituality, to our internal navigation system. See, this stuff wasn't just about the way it looked. It was about the arrows that pointed to what it governed, what it still governs, because energy doesn't die, it only transforms, right? So it's controlling the narrative. There's a story about the printing press and the Asians. Remember, India and Asia and Africa was all one. There wasn't really a distinguish, the history of the Han, right? So as the world changed, we changed. Technology changed. Survival and what it meant to survive changed. So energy doesn't die, it only transforms. We go to these churches, we'll be dealing with spirits and demons, we'll be possessed. Possession versus offerings. Who's giving offerings to our Creator? When we go to church, they say, this is the body, this is the bread, right? The blood is for the wine. It's an offering, a spiritual mental note that's going to what? Don't let me get started on how the white Jesus is not. If you haven't even done that research, start there. Okay, anyway, back to the story. Upon saying our goodbyes to the old man, Akunti immediately took me to his now deceased father's house to meet his mother and extended family. We slowly boarded Akunti's car, and so good to hear our story and his story, huh? Her story. She's telling her story about his story. We slowly boarded Akunti's car and began the slow, jerky drive down the narrow, unpaved road leading away from the old man's house. However, less than 1/3 of a mile down the road, whatever warning, the roof of the car supernaturally lifted off of the car, and the brilliant, blinding white light appeared in the clouds above our heads. As this was happening, the car began to lean on its left side, rolling only on 2 wheels. Then suddenly it slammed down hard onto the other 2 wheels as if it had been lifted and dropped. Calm, but mildly alarmed, Akunti and I looked at one another, and in a soft, knowing voice, he asked, "What was that?" And I replied, "I don't know." Akunti, a master of water, air, and fire spirits, was accustomed to such phenomena. And I Having experienced phenomena all my life, intuitively knew not to question it. Yeah. Check out this picture. That's her, one of her first meetings with him, where they were spiritually doing the removal, you know, getting her centered and getting rid of the mind control and the bad spirits that were put in her, so that she could be who she was called to be by the Creator, that she internalizes with her own DNA code as a free being on the planet. Above the conclusion of a long procession of healing ceremony during my first meeting with Akunti in Berkeley, California in 1987, Akunti called down the voodoo, Mami, and the Chichamba, TCHAMBA, to help me. Me being American, not familiar with these other words or how to say them, excuse me. He was my last hope. I had left my family and moved into a single-room apartment because the spirits were so strong. It had only a matter of time before I surrendered to insanity. The DMH, Department of Mental Health. The Vatican knows what they're doing. Or do they? Dun, dun, dun. Anyway. She said, I did not want my family to witness my progressive decline, so I moved out of the house and continued my search. I was about to give up my search and surrender until I met Akunti. It was the spring of 1988, and the first time that I had actually received credible validation that I was neither psycho, pathologically schizophrenic, hallucinating, insane, or evil, as had either been suggested or implied for so many years of my often unbearable and humiliating experiences in seeking assistance through Christian and Western spiritual modalities. Go ahead, say it. What? What did she say? What did she share with us as talk therapy? This is Siren Buddha Medicine. Siren Buddha Soft Medicine. We're here to heal each other. Some of us have other agendas, you know what I'm saying? This is one of mine. And don't think that it's not selfish in some form. Like, you know, I need the road to like branch out to the other side. I need somebody to talk to. This is therapeutic for me. I'll be all up in my head, right? I want your children to meet my children, my casa su casa. I want there to be a road. If we're still here, gosh darn it, is she going to be able to have a conversation? Am I going to be able to have a conversation? Did I put the work in to assure that I'm not just meeting a thug or somebody trying to drain me, some European trying to drain me, or some mind-controlled thug trying to drain me? From any nation, that I can meet a person who is like-minded. So if we don't put the work in, we can't get the work out. She put the work in. I'm sharing a blend. Okay? For some time, it was painfully clear, this is her, to me, that the West possessed neither any respect nor any clue of the esoteric ritual and ancient knowledge which was for centuries suppressed and denied to Africans enslaved in America. She's talking to those who are descendants of slaves from that portion. And the reason why I keep saying, remember that all was Africa. is because there's many layers to this. Okay? She's specifically in that space referring to that. Whereas those who have did further research, right, true, Frederick, know that all was Africa. Okay? Divine knowledge that our ancient ancestors mastered and passed down to their progeny, which still remain the only tangible path and sure treatment of the pervasive spiritual malice. That's maybe saying it wrong. Malice, excuse me. For the pervasive spiritual malice that plague our many in our diaspora. Millions suffering needlessly due to their conditioned fear and profound ignorance of their African religions. Traditions that are still being mocked, denounced, vilified, and whose ritual practices are disapproved in America. Still stubbornly being classified as primitive religions and Western enlightened academia. The sentiment of dysphoria, spiritual discontent for their ancestors and African gods is compounded by the sheer arrogance and utter absurdity of Western anthropologists who continue in their research to deny the diaspora's cosmologic link to their African deities, insisting that the enslaved diaspora carry no aspect of their African gods and their blood based upon their field findings. Conversely, the diaspora are still psychologically waiting on permission from these experts and Western society in general to validate what they themselves should see as their ancestral duty to resurrect, maintain, and demand that African spiritual traditions are never again omitted from religious texts taught in academia or mocked by the American media, nor even again denied them. Family, we are so afraid of ourselves, for better or worse. How are you going to marry someone else and not marry yourself first? How are we going to fall in love with everything else and not know ourselves and fall in love with ourselves first? It drives us crazy. Taking on all this other indoctrination, which, if the narrative and the visualizations are not important, then why work so hard to control them? So we know that that's a bunch of ish. I taught you about the ish, as I taught myself about the ish. There's something with this ish. Since letters and words are symbols and energy never dies and it only transfers. And these letters and words are actually messages like code symbols that were given us from the Iconian language, right? The Hebrew alphabet. How long it took me to realize that our ancestors were actually speaking to me. Me? Are you talking to me? Yeah, you. I want you. Me? We got some work to do because we don't fit the part. We don't feel the part. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You with the bloodline. Hey, baby. Get in there and get with the elements. She said that her go-to person was a master of fire, water, earth, air, and ether spirits. I knew what she was going through. He was plugged in. Let's continue her story. Upon my return to America, I made a mental note to myself not to renege my promise to the Master of Destiny, Afa. Each year, I saved my money in a small envelope kept in an old coat pocket, visualizing my next return, hoping that whatever I was to undergo would finally put me and my ancestors at peace. When time became too tough, I'd remember my mother and vow to live another day until I could return back to Africa. I had been born just as my mother, her mother, and her great-grandmother and fathers, carrying the deities and lineage of Mama and her voodoo. In our home, you gotta excuse me because I'm like really, didn't read all this story. I decided to read it to you and share the feelings and emotions with you. In our home growing up in the windy city of Chicago, there were constant visitations, manifestations, and other phenomena, which after a while became normal and routine for my family. The first few years of my life, my mother recounts jokingly that she thought that I was blind because I would rock in my rocker for hours without uttering a single word, staring into another world. Placing her hand in front of my face, she recounts, would not cause me to blink. She sounds like an Aquarius. This behavior continued well into my adolescent and young adult life. For years, I had missed many normal childhood and adolescent activities. Strongly compelled instead to remain alone in my room with the spirits and listening for hours on end to the sounds of Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Dakota Station, Sharman McRae, and Dina Washington, and a host of other jazz musicians. Now you got to know about the origins of voodoo and the music of jazz, of which my mother maintained an extensive collection. It was our only source of comfort and at the time. So the jazz musicians was our only source of comfort at the time, and we seemed to be the only women folk who favored it above anything else. I love jazz. Does this sound like any of you listening to me? Does it sound like something that you stuffed down, or anybody you know? Does it sound like a child that you have? Does it sound like any family member or a friend? I had long ago, does it sound like something in you that you pushed aside and tried to fit in with traditional religions or left them all together? I don't know. Some of us are so bent we turn into atheists and believe in nothing. I don't really know voodoo. I'm getting accustomed to the fact that it means so much more than what they were showing to us. It's not what voodoo even means. It was in me and a part of me without even me. I'm responding to Frederick saying, I know some jazz and very little voodoo. I can't see if all what you're saying. Yeah, so I didn't know. This is a part of self-discovering. There's so many different layers to this and so many different, levels to discover. Sometimes we're doing things and we don't even realize what it is because it's in our blood. Okay. I'm going to continue. I had long ago matured beyond the point of running out of the room, panicked and out of breath, to report a great detail, yet another visitation to my mother, because I knew that I would only frighten and worry her. She struggles with her own spirits. Was teaching me what it meant being a black woman in the 1960s America, and to quietly suffer the spirits, as they would say, all my life, just as all my mothers. The suffering only intensified with me. Inconceivable psychic, physical, and suffering only intensified. The emotional torment that would settle down for a short span and then reemerge stronger than before, because the African spiritual traditions as they existed in America had suffered a crushing blow at the hands of racial, cultural, and religious bigotry, being reduced to little more than popular folk magic, and rendered it near to impossible to find the level of priestly assistance that we all needed. So this is her interpretation. He says, I believe in the sun. Some think I am atheist. Not that I give a ish. It's good to believe in something, because if we have no reference point, we can't even measure ourselves. From whatever place we believe in. I believed in many things and felt around about many different things until I was able to adjust it. And that's a part of living and growing and learning. The teacher is the student. Because if we stop learning, we become stagnant. And that's a messed up teacher who doesn't need to learn anything any longer when we're in a progressive world and life is ever flowing in movement. So we can always learn something. The wounded healer has to heal. And we learn more about ourselves each day, right? And looking back, I don't think anyone in my family was prepared or had even anticipated the spirits coming back through us, especially following the murder of my great-great-grandfather, Prince Hunter. This followed the ultimate untimely death of his daughter, my great-grandmother, Pauline Promise, who maintained a vineyard on her vast land and who could talk the sickness out of a person because it was they who actually knew the spirits. What? Born around 1857 and affectionately known as Papa Prince, was a master priest and elder of our family. He kept his voodoo tucked beneath the house, and special bottles, dirt mounds, and ceramic pots hidden away from the piercing and pursuing eyes of Christian zealots and their converted black spies who would run and report on such heathen practices. Papa was one of many priests who tended to spiritual needs of not only his, but of the entire community. And Nature Natchez Parish, Louisiana. That's Natchitoches. Picture. Prince Hunter. Prince Hunter material great-great matriarchal great-great-grandfather of Arthur Mami Vivian Hunter Hindu Natchitoches Parish, Louisiana, 1888. Prince was chained and set ablaze by a group of Christians, claiming his spiritual powers were from the devil. When they went to retrieve his body, it was not there. Cannibals in the house, y'all. We got cannibals. They probably thought they could heal something on the low by eating his flesh. There used to be a cookbook, and they were still, what date was this? 1888? Yeah, they still had the cookbook where they were taking parts and making different healing remedies out of the melanated flesh, y'all. Anyhow, they set him ablaze, claiming his spiritual powers were from the devil. And when they went to retrieve the body, it was not there. His death caused untold grief and suffering for the family and the spirits. And was this from the religious terrorism sanctioned by the state, which made many in diaspora afraid to continue the practice of their ancient traditions? Go figure, huh? Born in 1857, affectionately known as Papa Prince. His story, controlling the narrative. According, killing the healers is not okay. They still do that mess to control the narrative and the money, the flow of the matrix. According to family lore, Papa was dressed in white, including wearing white gloves. He was an agora ventriloquist. That ventriloquist, meaning that he could speak and communicate with birds and the dead. What? A natural ability from his bloodline. We are told that even for those indigenous to America who don't feel like they were brought from one part of Africa to another part of Africa, which was renamed America, we are told that he kept a huge serpent in a small lake that would act as a bridge when he needed to cross. That has a lot of symbolism to it with what I found with a lot of other research, synonymous with a lot of other research. The serpent rainbow, right? And you're going back to Pan, and you're going back to deities, water deities synonymous with the usurped Jesus, okay? Isis. We are all told that Papa maintained a stable of white horses which were sacred to him, and when called anywhere in the city or state, he would go riding one of his favorite horses. One great cousin shared how she walked in on him one day, messing with some eggs that were cooking themselves on the ground outside with no fire. She recounted how he slapped her hand as she naively went to touch one. We are further told that he met his untimely death at the hands of a derelict group of Christians who forbade the traditional African practices and had been watching and intimidating him for some time. Sounds like gang stalking, y'all. When he refused to stop, and they chased him into a barn, chained him inside, and set him ablaze. After the barn was burned completely to the ground, the Christian mob went to retrieve his body, but it was not there. Oh, okay. We are told that the spirits took him and that he was never spoken about again in our family. Papa's death and the circumstances surrounding it remained a well-kept family secret. So, whether they believed that he was taken up by ancestral spirits, or whether the Christians actually took the body and lied that it wasn't there when the mob went back to retrieve the body. Why would the mob go back to retrieve the body? She's recounting the story, but to me it sounds like, when the police come and you're giving the report and it says, well, what happened? And somebody lies, say, well, we went back, but it wasn't there. We ate it. Took the parts, we sold them. But we're not going to speak about it as a family because it was so freaking gruesome. Nobody want to talk about that. And how he shined and helped people. And how that angered and made people jealous. What black person do you know in America has a barn of white horses who is still in touch with their DNA, who they can activate their chi energy to the point where they can cook eggs on the ground, y'all? Have eggs cook themselves on the ground with their chi energy. There was a story about this Asian man called Dynamo Jack, and he could heal people with the energy of his chi and boil water and things. There are accounts, push hands, there's many different levels to working with chi energy, which I'm feeling in my hands right now. Listening to this story of history, our ancestral history. Look at that smile. That's us. Instead of, oh my God, he's hanging from a tree. It's so terrible. It's the butler. It's the maid. It's the pimp. It's the drug dealer. It's the wounded healer, y'all. What was his name? Let's remember. Papa Prince. Prince Hunter. They called Papa Prince, born in 1857. Who had a stable of white horses and healed people. And he was in touch with his ancestral past. And his daughter, the woman who wrote this book, great-great-grandmommy, could talk spirits, could talk sickness out of bodies, could talk dis-ease out of carbon-based molecules. Okay, I'm having too much fun. Okay. Tragically, Papa took the sacred knowledge with him, and what my great-great-grandmother knew, she had no strength left to continue. His untimely and tragic death devastated my family, as I imagined similar such circumstances as part of the great effort in America to abolish African traditional practices once and for all. They feared it, but they respected it, and they duplicated it, and they usurped it. That's me. And you can see that in some of the layouts and designs of the cities and buildings. The knowledge of the Chaldeans. our ancient knowledge. What? That we're afraid of. But they can have it. They can use it because they know better than us, right? They have more moral fiber than us. They have more education than us. But even though they messed with the value of our education, yeah, we should trust them, right? You talking to me? Me? Me, the one who is brainwashed into thinking that I should trust them? Yeah, I get it now. Yeah. I should learn to trust myself. I should learn to fix myself so that I can trust my own freaking navigation system better than trusting someone else's navigation system that doesn't mean me well. And the telephone game has been going on for so long that they don't even know what the blip, a lot of them, they did and what they're initiating as systems of control. They actually believe that they're the authors and initiators of this vast culture without respecting it. And I'm not saying all. There are people who respect our culture. But they're not going to tell you that until you respect your own culture. It's a secret. My mother, who suffered misfortune of being born in 1933, I'm back to the book, with the spirits on both sides of her family, didn't have a chance. Her maternal grandparents were master artisans and masons. What? She liked jazz music. Originating out of Natchitoches, the Natchitoches parish in Louisiana, and finally settling in Brooklyn, Illinois, born into the voodoo religion. Her own father died before she was born, but not before telling his mother that he knew that he was going to have a daughter. He foretold how she would suffer if she, his mother, a voodoo practitioner herself, didn't raise her. At least that 1 month after my mother was born, he's stricken with tuberculosis or black lung. Lingered long enough to see her face. Unfortunately, his mother only lived until my mother reached the age of 13. With no relief in sight, my mother suffered with spirits all of her young life in America. The old knowledge simply was no longer openly available. The voodoo in America had taken refuge underground and had become increasingly difficult to access. Yeah, even the way that we freaking internalize it is like, don't touch that. Why would you even look for it? Why would you even see that as medicine? What eventually has passed as voodoo is what world believes today as, i.e., charms, voodoo dolls, luck oils, and other hoodoo paraphernalia. Yeah, hoodoo paraphernalia. None of that has to do with spiritual cleansing or appeasement, offerings, acknowledgments to appease passions for possessions. The grammar and glamour of it all. Controlling the narrative is the grimoire. Eventually, back to the book, I watched my mother die at the youthful age of 38, exhausted from the heaviness of spirits and the humiliation of Jim Crow, which greatly hampered both her diligently and her economic ability to search outside the continental U.S. for the assistance that she needed. The spirits gave her, and now me, no rest, as they gradually manifested in ways that until today I do not know how I maintained my sanity. At one point I attempted suicide, but the spirits would come and not allow me to die. This is our sister speaking. Her history, family history, strong in her family lineage, and her blood, the Alpha. Who's that in the picture? I told you, right? In the picture, that was Prince Hunter. Her father, they called Papa Prince. He was a master and elder of her family. And she, remember, went and sought out Akulti, who was a master of fire, water, earth, air, and ether spirits, and still plugged in to the lineage and his family history and his family practicing. So she went and sought out the roots to get healing. A young Akunti in training by Mamasi Hudun Anji Akunti grew to become one of the most powerful and master priests of his generation. That's who she studied from in this picture. 3 generations later, there stood at the tender age of 17, 1973, frightened, frustrated, alone, uncertain of my mental and emotional health and spiritual future. My greatest concern was that I would ultimately meet the same fates as all of my mothers, and feared having a family of my own, lest they too should inherit the family curse. Since I believed that I would die young, I vowed to sacrifice what was left of my life in my ancestors' honor, and to continue my search for someone who possessed the old knowledge of spiritual power. And professional ethics to guide me through the very delicate process of healing, self-discovery, and ancestral completeness that had so eluded my life. As I'd imagined, that had so eluded my life, I'd imagined it had millions of others in dysphoria. As I'd imagined it had millions of others and the dysphoria. So that's why she did this for us, to make that connection. You know about the consciousness grid and how each one teach one, and that, that's a way that we're connected. In the same way that we can all feel a downward consonance as a people, or could feel to feel privileged like Jews, or like Europeans, because of a trait or a purpose that resonates through the consciousness grid, because they're unified, and these are universal laws being exploited. by way of perception, how we're perceiving life in the world around us. Not able to equate our own validity, purpose, a credibility, moral fiber, past problems and issues, accomplishments, when we're not able to get a proper assessment of ourselves as a people, then the frequency and the signal is thrown off. And that's a part of why it's so important to control the narrative, right? And the way that we see ourselves. It helps control the way that we see ourselves. And so at this time, when you keep people sick, that benefited the world, no? Because we're the originators of the medicine. So you can keep the foot on the neck of that thing that breathes life into society in the matrix. But you'll be stuck in 1950s indefinitely. Like, I think that movie Smallville, where it was all black and white, then turned color. It wasn't, well, that was a movie that I found fascinating. But there was this other movie where, I don't remember the name of it, but they were like living underground in a bunker, and they were stuck in a certain period of time, just like that too. It was weird. The disclosure in movies are saying that we had a decline. We had a de-evolution in technology and in thinking as a direct result of some stuff that we had to figure out and spiritually go through in order to grow. This is our journey. Okay? I wanted to say, nobody of any other nation is going to want us to figure anything out, just to take the disposition to do the exact same thing that's been done. That's not spiritual evolution. That's not betterment. That's repeating the insanity, right? Doing the same thing, expecting different results is insanity. So, when the insane people get a clue that something is wrong, they're even going through a process of evolution and waking up to the fact that, wait a minute, I did some things wrong and I don't exactly want my butt whipped. After I decided to correct myself, you know what I'm saying? If these people are the leader of civilization and we're sitting on their stuff, I can either be extremely frightened and do everything to suppress and continue to do that and say, well, it wasn't me. It was my great-great-grandfather. And I've never had a slave, but benefit from the proceeds of the suppression of a people, even though it was something that we spiritually needed to go through and we're coming out of in order to find ourselves and connect ourselves back with the different pieces. There are many layers. The different pieces of ourselves in order to make ourselves whole, to get a proper assessment of who we are in order to move forward. We're still collecting pieces. She's here to help us collect pieces of ourselves. And I'm grateful to hear her story about history. Let's go further. Years later, in 1987, at the age 31, my meeting with Akunti was my greatest blessing that my ancestors had bestowed upon me. Us visiting the old man master Bokunu, Bokono, and identifying and validating the spirits that had sent me to them was an even greater blessing to me. It had gave me an extra charge of courage, hope, and determination to continue on our journey. Her connectivity. She's bringing us with her realizing, and they see her when she goes there, and she said she's supposed to open up temples, right? And she was carrying the bloodline in her blood, and how they said no one but Africans suffer like this. How they too are going through a process of awakening, realizing what has happened, what has been suffered, and the deepness of the damage that has been done, and how we look at ourselves. All is Africa. All is mother. All is sustaining. During the 7-year wait, it's funny because mom is mom. We can call it whatever we like, right? India, America, Africa, but mom is mom, right? Europe. And so you take mom, just bring in here, and mom has arms and legs and boobs and a womb space and lips and eyes and a nose and hair and feet, right? A buttocks. All the different parts do something different. There you go with the embedding and the symbolism, okay? So we can call the world different parts and section them off, dismember her, but it's still the womb space in which we get everything that we need. We can't live without what's provided here. Okay, so it's still mama. During the 7-year wait, I had managed to complete my graduate work, travel, and maintain some sense of normacy and family life. I saw and spoke with Akanti often and maintained close contact with him in Togo. Anytime he traveled, he made a point to contact me to make certain that I was getting along well. I had grown to love and depend on his precious guidance and invaluable wisdom. Akanti was a master priest of both Mami, and the Yavu voodoo thunder god, Hevusso. That's Heviosso. He was a medical physician and fluent in many African languages and French and German, having spent nearly a decade in sacrifice, Bay, forest in Togo. He was also a master shaman. His life too was disrupted during his medical residency while living in Germany when the spirits came calling. Although they would quickly heal his patients, the spirit gave him no peace until he returned to his village and underwent necessary ceremonies to take over the family shrines. Energy never dies, it only transforms, and this is real, y'all. We can name it and call it, label it different things, but the essence of who we are remains. The intention needs to be the priority. You know, heart coherence, as I learned from Dan Winters, leads to the part that will enable you to access what it is you need, or where it is, on your spiritual journey, what you really want. Excuse me. Excuse me. In Africa, a Kanti was known as a priest of priests, meaning that he was also a master divinator and ritualist. He used no implements to divine. The spirits would simply talk to him and tell him all he needed to know. Not only about the client's current life, but also all of their past lives. During my first trip to Togo, now, this is not hard for me to believe, hearing about Edgar Casey from another culture who was a healer, showing you our face. This is the picture. Get up in your face. Oh, being initiated to ancestral thunder spirit, Togo, West Africa, 1985. The thunder spirit is Thor, and Thor is who? Jesus and Jesus morphed. The concept. It's good to know that, you know what I'm saying? To let it start to settle in as food, and not feel so confused by it, In Africa, Nkanti was known as the priestess of priests, meaning that he was also a master diviner and ritualist. He used no implements to divine. The spirits would simply talk to him and tell him all he needed to know, not only about the client's current life, but also about their past lives. During my first trip to Togo in 1988, he invited me to stay with him at his shrine, at his home in Bagudia, that's Baguida, to watch him conduct healing ceremonies. After witnessing him in action, I knew that I was in Africa, where the divine will of the gods first descended and revealed their mysteries. There was no doubt in my mind then, as there is not now. I also understood that in order for one to fully appreciate the spiritual philosophy, cosmetology, and sacred rituals of ancient Kemet, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Minoa, and later African, Greco, and African Roman culture, it was impossible to ignore the sacred traditions of the Mami Wata and Voodoo of Africa. I am convinced that it is there, West Africa, where the ancient African ethnic groups now collectively, as the Egyptians made their final migratory home after the untold number of foreign invasions, Ai, Assyrians, Hortus Greeks, Turks, pirates, Romans, British, etc., and colonizations exiled them from their ancient homelands. When I was listening to Dan Winters, he was talking about the terrestrial past, the ancient historical past of the planet, the ET history. And Bobby Hemmett, you were able to get the background of some of this, the migration, and the morph into Buddha, right? This is Siren Buddha Medicine, media sign. This is Siren Buddha Medicine. This is talk therapy. And this is Regina's Rabbit Hole. There's a reason why I call it Regina's Rabbit Hole, because there's so many levels to this, right? To waking up, to seeing ourselves. in ourselves and not in just everyone else. It's pulling the pieces together. So yes, extract, right, the different pieces, and don't be afraid, but do it with the proper intention of healing, of becoming whole, of truly seeing ourselves, and then pull it in, right? They, the Egyptians, as West African historians would have the world believe, did not fall off the face of the earth, nor did they nor their language and spirits become extinct. They are in West Africa and other locations throughout the continent and the world. The many Africans who were shipped across the Atlantic are also their lineage descendants, and the African spirits that tell the truth history of the world, as they make themselves known through the existential suffering of their progeny. All that I have personally experienced since birth, and all that I have seen in my own family, made perfect sense only when contextualized within the African spiritual ritual and philosophical frameworks that I was now privileged to witness. And in no other world did it make any sense. A Kunti and author taking a break in San Francisco. Picture. Sophie, look at yourself. All is self. Much love to you and yours. From the Wounded Healer. Glimpses of you. I'm so in love with you. Because you're me. I love to see me in you. As opposed to only looking at myself. Literally. Never mind. That was a riddle. Okay. Being born with my spirits in America, where African religions are systematically demonetized, placed in keen perspective the great collective suffering witnessed daily in the diaspora. Akunti had always forewarned me that the spirits are coming back, and when they do, they come to the aid of the African people. However, he also cautioned that this blessing could work both ways. He could either mean good news for some and a curse for others, depending on many historical and personal factors. That's why I say watch what you're doing. There's people going into these systems looking for voodoo, or going into other spiritual systems, looking into stuff, but they're doing it with the distortion in the forefront of their minds and their hearts. Jealousy, envy, ego, they want power and control. It's okay to want things, right? But they want things that they know are going to make other people feel smaller. Want things to make themselves seem bigger, to reduce themselves from the smallness that they already feel, instead of dealing with the smallness and then expanding themselves into a place where the expansion can help other people to mend and heal. It's just the place of 0.0 space is very important when you're touching these systems and doing these things. This energy is very alive. Even when it comes into the language, the Kundalini energy, the healing field, right? our ancestors know, and they're not making any way for, if you're not on the side of things that's going to be beneficial, then you'll be on the other side of things that's beneficial as an offering in another way, where your desire, you'll be like a burnt offering, where your desires will burn your wick, right? Because we decide to do counterproductive things. So, demons can be utilized, right? The Creator says He uses all things for the purpose of Yah, right? All things. So when we look at this energy, is money bad? Is money good? Who's got the money is what you want to think. And within the heart coherence, what are their intentions? What do they plan on doing with it? What is their mentality? Sometimes you can have good intentions, but your mentality is off. And so that's the wounded healer that realizes the spaces where we need to heal ourselves. Instead of portraying the cockamamie illusion, that everything is supposed to depict itself as well. And I already went through that. Like, if you're all set, then you can't learn anything. You can't even evolve because you're stagnant. During the 7-year wait, I managed to... Oh, I read that. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're done with that. Okay? Be careful. Be careful about how you relate to others and how you relate to yourself. Do the work. The first thing that, one should be asking for is to help clean out all the gunk that makes us feel bad. Lead me to the work that needs to be done so that I can be of help, so that I can be productive, so that I can die well, so that I can live well, so that I can interact well. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to being bogged down by spirits more unnecessarily than need be. I'm going to end it here today. I'm going to end it here today. I'm on page 303. What? If I pick up this conversation, I'm going to read this. You can get the book. You can read that. There's volume 1 and 2. Invest in that, definitely. We bought Bibles, hymnals, all kinds of stuff. Bookmarks with prayers on them. All good. All lovely. All great tools. But not if we don't include ourselves and what that looks like too. So hopefully that explains what I was talking about as far as possession. Offerings. Birthright. Free will. What you're born with. Said the black woman. You got to get this book. All right. Is the first free woman on the earth by way of genetics, ancestral history. And you don't have to take my word for it. Go check out the other sources, the resources that I gave you, and you can see for yourself. So family, this was good for me. Anybody got any questions or want to share anything else? You were a lot of fun, Frederick. Thanks. Ingram, you in there? Good day, Jerry. Hi, beloved. Much love to you and yours. Love my cuz. He has a barbershop. Really cool barbershop. Blazing Cuts, I think, in Philadelphia. I was born in Philly. The angel of Philadelphia remains in Philadelphia. Anyway, I'm out. Much love to you and yours. Have a good one.